Hey, 3D MJers, this is Alberto Nunez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today, you'll hear a conversation with myself and Eric Helms talking about all his recent 2019 contest prep season. I got to play coach for my friend and colleague who just completed the most successful diet of his career, and we will be discussing every detail about what went into that. We'll hear dates, timelines, game plans, calorie intakes, training adjustments, lifestyle changes, and everything in between. We also talk about Eric's previous contest prep seasons in comparison to the most recent one and what things we did differently to really get him dialed in and looking right after his extended 8-year off season. Yeah, you heard right, 8-year off season. As usual, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast 136. Thank you so much for listening, and let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, Helms, what are we here for today?
Coach, you're going to tell me how much of a bad athlete I was.
Oh, naughty.
A naughty athlete. A bad bodybuilder.
Yeah. Well, I think
We're in the postseason.
we're not done with the prep, man.
We're not.
We're not done with the prep. Like, there's stages to this thing, so doesn't end at the buffet after the show, unfortunately.
Unfortunately not, or fortunately not, depending on,
Very good.
how you look at it. So I guess status of the prep in whole. I guess season in review, real high level. Started my diet December 18th. Dieted through to my first show mid-April. Diet break. Actually, I had a diet break in February as well, but 2-week diet break in Italy. Dieted hard, pushed all the way through mid-June. Got into peak leanness, I would say, and then we started bringing calories up, and I got to peak conditioning, I would say, for my shows July 6th, July 20th, improved the peak week, and then held that condition, competed my last show August 10th, started the recovery diet, and did the strongman comp 4 weeks after my first show, and now we are just short of 2 weeks after that, so I'm 5 weeks and 5 days, probably about where the official recovery diet phase ends, and now I'm finding my weight stabilizing.
Okay. Well, I guess to first, I had a question, and this is pertaining to. Obviously, we had these little pit stops so that it would make the rest of the journey easy, and a big reason as to why it works that way, it's because it's a tune-up, man. It helps keep things healthy and clean. Did you notice a difference? Because this is the most diet breaks I think you've had during any prep.
Absolutely, yeah. So, damn, I don't even know if I had a diet break in 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had a diet break in 2011.
Okay. I thought you might have had like a few 3 or 4 day hiatuses. We call them diet breaks, but 3 or 4 days, what does that really do?
It does. It's like a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in 2011 I was running. The one thing I did do was I had 2 high days on the weekends and then 1 midweek moderate day.
Yeah.
So that was the first prep where I had consistent weight loss throughout.
So it did help that out. So it made it so that we weren't as messed up at different stages. Because usually, as you come down in body weight, you kind of know what to expect at this range, and you know what's still functioning at a normal level at this range, and so on and so on. Were there improvements?
Massively. So as a comparison, 2011 I got about as lean as I got for my show in April. And the only reason we shut down that prep is because mission accomplished. I won a show, got my PNBA Pro qualified status, and I was like, I'm done. You know. This time, at that same level of leanness, which I got to earlier, because I started leaner, I'd already had 2 diet breaks, and I was running 2 refeeds per week the whole time. So I was able to get from December 18th to mid-April with 15 or 16 total weeks of prep, and only maybe 12 weeks of that actually being diet weeks, because I had the diet break in February and 2 refeeds per week. I got in the same condition with more muscle, much higher stage weight, and I felt fine. You know, I had a 10-day hard period that we pushed real hard, pushed on low days to get in shape. Started to feel a little bit, but then with peak week when it came back up, man, I felt right back to normal. So I'd say, shit, man. Difficulty in 2011 and level of beat upness by the end was maybe a 6 out of 10. Okay. I was probably a 4 out of 10 by the time we did the April show.
Okay.
So 50% better.
All right. So by staying healthier, it not only does it just improve the overall quality of life, right? Because there's a point where the sport just doesn't leave you. Correct. You know, you can't get away for the weekend and be like, we're just gonna put this bodybuilding thing away. It's like all the sucky things come with you. So besides that, it also makes it easier to just keep going forward and push harder. You have more kick at the end if you manage your fatigue, you know, on the way down. Yeah. So I think, you were in a great position to push as hard as we needed to push because we paced it in such a responsible way.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think, so like, for example, if after my win in 2011, we were like, all right, now it's time to get you in real shape and you're going to go do Natural Olympia or whatever and do your PNBA pro debut. We would have had which would have been September. I would have had to keep dieting 2 more months and I would have gotten that kind of shape, but I think I would have been just ready to not bodybuild for a long time. And I probably would have had a big rebound because I had a very minor rebound in 2011, arguably less weight rebound than this time. And I stayed leaner for longer because, one, we thought the reverse diet was a good thing.
Yes, yeah.
And two, while I was less beat up this time at the same condition in April than I was in August of 2011, I got more beat up this time pushing to how shredded I ended up getting for July and August. But I never got that lean in 2011. So I totally agree. We set me up to get to truly elite levels of conditioning. And, you know, I suffered the consequences, but no one survives that. So,
and you can't even get there if you're not in a position to get it. So I'm not saying we're okay with screwing someone up, but you speak with your athlete, or you kind of see where they're at, before you send them out for like that 12th round. And but you're in a great position to execute that if it's the appropriate thing to do. And for some people, they can be like 8 pounds out and they feel that way. Yeah. And that's a horrible. Like, we've been in those positions where you're like, man, I know how far I have to go. Yeah. But this is going to be very stubborn, and mentally, this is not going to be a very fantastic experience. Not that it ever is, but it's easier when you're doing it to get exactly what it is that you want. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, I was completely done, crushed, and gained almost 50 pounds in 2 months in my first season. And I got to the condition I was in February, Yeah. No even glute dense or hamstring separation. Well, I had some hamstring separation, but I was maybe 8 or 9% body fat in 2007 and ready to just eat the world.
And we're all sold on that idea that that's how prep is supposed to be. I recall that, this is from basically week 1, like how it's like, it feels like death. You're prepping now. This is different. When in reality, you want to delay that and experience only as much of it. Not, I think a lot of people hear that, especially, I know how the bodybuilding culture is, and they're like, well, you want to soften it up. The experience is like, no. If you push hard enough, like those last bits of fat that you strip off, they're going to be a freaking adventure regardless. Yeah.
And any softening up is just to allow you to push harder in a productive manner instead of just generally pushing hard but not getting that in great shape.
Like any sort of planning. We do that with our training, for example, right? It's so that, you can take that one set to failure, but that's kind of it. Your day's over, Yeah. Excellent. So we got into shape. We were able to taper calories up, which once we got there, it made the look better. Water retention, recovered muscle. Yeah. Some spots get tighter, and I suspect sometimes your body gets ahead of itself, and it's like, so you look better. And I think the most important thing is, not the most important thing, but it's something that in the midst of the competitive spirit we forget, is the fact that, hey, this is going to set you up so that when this is done with, you can be just a little bit better.
So that's a funny thing. I was saying how arguably I had less of a rebound and I stayed tighter and all that stuff. it depends on at what point you count from.
Yeah.
So like in 2011, calories never came up until I'd finished my season. So if we wanted to compare from when my calories started coming up in 2011 when my calories started coming up this time, my calories started coming up in June. So I was eating up through mid-June, all of July, and then the first 10 days of August into my show. So I had 2 solid months, 9 weeks of eating up. And by the time I was just sitting at 2,400 to 2,800 calories, shredded at the bone, every day, ready to go. So, I mean, in that way, you could say I did a reverse diet before the prep was over, which we just call eating up into a show. And, man, you're 100% right. It's hard to know whether am I actually getting leaner or am I regaining lost muscle because I can train harder, or is it, being able to fill out more glycogen, or is it all the above, or is it water retention loss? I think it's every single one of those factors. So that definitely happened. It was really cool to see. And it built a lot of confidence. That's one thing, like when you're on the way down, or in my previous preps where I'm on the way down, crushing myself to get in shape, part of it's because you're crazy, but the other part is that you actually have this beat up, weird look half the time. So like one day you'll look great, one day you'll look not so great. One day you'll look fantastic, the next day, and you can't figure out why or when, and it makes you feel crazy, and you also are crazy. Sometimes it is just you focusing on the wrong thing, but it was just such a relief to have basically, I think, each time I saw pictures, like when I was in Melbourne and Jeff Nippard took pictures with me and he showed them to me and I was just like, what the fuck? And then I just noticed, I always look like this. Like on my worst day, I look 5% different than on my best day. And that was just such a relief to know that I'd done the work and that there wasn't some weird water genie in the middle of the night who's going to make me look weird like it felt like in, say, 2009, where I would just one day wake up without quads because I was just so beat up and jacked up from all the cardio and stuff I was doing.
Yeah, so, I mean, we got a head start with that. Overall, healthier prep, in every way, how we made it to the land of the shredded, and then how we pulled you out to, like, laminate the final product and make it extra pretty, right? And then again, like something we just really, really try to emphasize is that the healthier you can make this, the more successful it's going to be. You're not going to be healthy. That's anytime you do something competitive, it's like you've kind of signed away that part, right?
Right.
But if you make it healthier, it's tricky. You'll be able to push harder and harder. Again, when we started, we thought it was the inverse of that.
Exactly.
Not necessarily. So we did a good job with the prep part, and showing your physique. We took care of everything way better than in previous years. How about when we look at everything, and we mentioned, this doesn't leave you alone, this bodybuilding thing.
Right.
How much better was balancing?
Man, I felt like I was cheating. And if you heard me on podcasts, I was like almost borderline bragging about how easy it was and how I was keeping up with everything. And I'd say that was true through May. In May, it just started. So I just did my show in April. And, we don't recommend this, but just to put it out there to those listening, just to show you how mentally in command I was. I never went to the grocery store in Hawaii. So I did a peak week completely eyeballing sushi and meals out, and I peaked pretty damn well. So that's definitely possible. I'm sure there are some bodybuilders right now whose brains just exploded. So yeah, I eyeballed a peak week, which is not recommended, but that didn't stress me out. And I did a conference in February. I went immediately from Hawaii to Italy. And normally that's an absolute recipe for disaster. Like if I had an athlete tell me, hey, I got shows in April and July and the plan is to go on a vacation after my April show, I'd be like, there's a 10% chance you're actually going to do those July shows. You're going to accidentally end your season in Florence with pizza. And I gained 0.5 kilo and looked leaner in Italy. And again, didn't track, didn't feel restrained. I just made good decisions. So that honestly made me feel like like it was unfathomable to me that was something I could do. So that was all good. May, it just started getting annoying. So I started to see that, okay, we need to push. And I think we had the traditional, this is where I think the difference between what's best on paper and what is best as far as the athlete's perception is what changed for me. I just noticed, I'm on 1,700 calories on low days, and I'm on like 25 on my 2 high days, and we're slowly losing. And we'll slowly lose, and I'll be in shape for my shows in July. And that's on paper what's best, not going hard, especially when you're in a phase where you're most likely to lose muscle mass. Mm-hmm. But it was annoying to me, and I just hated it. And I was like, look, can we just get in there, get dirty, get nasty, and get this shit done? And we pushed, I think, 3 or 4 weeks of lower days, and then 2 weeks of just insanely low days to break a plateau. And that was really, really hard. It worked out. I didn't have meetings. I didn't have shit to do. And I was unproductive. And I was basically like the stereotypical shitty prep for 2 weeks. And it got to a difficulty 8 out of 10. I was pushing, as you know, 1,200 calorie days, 5 days in a row with 2 2,500 calorie day refeeds. That's just under 9 kcals per pound for, again, only 2 weeks out of the whole prep. And that was miserable. It was exactly what I expected it to be, but it was still nowhere near as hard as, say, 2009 or 2007, my first 2 seasons. And it was not what a prep should be, or ideally what we want it to be, but it was exactly what I'd prepared for, planned for, had the time for, and I preferred it to being kind of just hovering around a 5 to 6 difficulty for 2.5 months. And then once we finished it and we started eating up, it was easy. Again, not as easy because I was shredded, but it was like a 5 out of 10 instead of a 4.
Is that when your wife was like, can you please feed him, Bert?
I think it probably right around there.
Oh.
Yeah, it was. But I remember...
It was like 1 more week, man.
Yeah, exactly. She was like... I think we pushed 3 weeks. And the first week I was on 1,400, 1,300, and then we went just straight up 2 1,200 calorie weeks in a row. And I think in retrospect, Barb was like, I really hope he's done. Because I was just... I wasn't even being like, I was a dick. I was irritable. I was lethargic. I was just a slug, and there wasn't a whole lot getting done. And I was just living meal to meal. Mm-hmm. So I went zombie mode for a solid 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just told her like, hey, here's what I'm planning. Because to me, it's much more mentally difficult, the idea to push 9 weeks at a 6 difficulty. Give me 2 at a max difficulty, and that's going to be easier. And then as soon as calories started coming up, and especially when I had the confidence in seeing myself with shredded glutes, it was, again, easier, but not as easy as when I was coming into the April show. And this is when I really noticed, like, it's not just about what you're eating. It's about, like, are you lean and how much are you eating? And if you're really, really lean, there's only so much you can fix with eating up and eating a lot of food. Because, I mean, I'd be on a 2,800 calorie day, but I was so shredded that it felt like if I miss a meal, I'm right back to hard knock life. So
okay, all right. Okay. So the thing with you that made us push that way, I think, also is the fact that I don't think you lose a whole lot of muscle compared to some people.
I didn't seem to.
No, you don't.
I flatten out, and I think if I stay chronically flat, it becomes problematic. I think that happened in 2011. Yeah. I pushed my volume too low for one. I wasn't training the way I should have. But then I flattened out, and we just kept me flat. I kept me flat for a couple months, mm-hmm. and then it's just like, it started as flat, and now you just don't have that anymore. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But this time, like, I just didn't really look at myself for those 2 weeks, except for, did my glutes come in, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't ask the question, am I flat? Do I look like shit? Can I perform? Because I was like, I'm eating 1,200 calories. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to be good, and I don't care. And I think a lot of competitors can mind F themselves into not following that path. So I knew what I was in for, and I was like, I'm going to be eating up for 2 months. Like, whatever I lose will come back. And that's what I convinced myself of. And it helped that I've seen that with my clients. I'd never done that before, but I've done that with double-digit number of competitors, where that fullness comes right back with some high days.
Yeah, yeah. No, and again, you've never really lost muscle. Like I try to go back and think of you like kind of in this weight range and what it's looked like in the past. There's nothing funny or weird looking. Like, oh, you know, like his back is usually more dense or something. No, it's like all there. So so I felt comfortable with that. And again, it's how you take care of that last leg. I think that's where, having done it many times with many different kinds of people, is something you have to take into consideration. Like some people, it's like, hey, pull that Band-Aid off slowly, you know?
Yeah.
Other folks, it's like, hey, let's just go for it. And other folks, it's like, it's kind of blends into the rest of the prep.
Yeah, that does not even phase us. They just keep losing until they get shredded, and then you decide they're lean enough to bring it up.
So no, we did good with that. Drill was a little crazy, but we're good. Okay, so that was mentally the most invasive part?
Yes, and it was good timing because I didn't have shit to do. And I also wanted to get it done and dusted with time to eat up before my schedule was challenging. It was cool that I did it, but it was obviously like not ideal.
Yeah.
You know, so I had the 1 week out from my first show in Cali, I had the UEBC. And then 1 week out from my last show in August, I had the EPC. So my two biggest conferences of the year were both exactly 1 week out from my second and fourth show. So.
And then we had another leg that was mentally a little hard as when we got to California, I think, right? That's when...
So UEBC was 1 week out from me going to California. And that was fun. It was a good distraction. And that was where I got those pictures with Jeff Nippard where I saw like, oh shit, I'm not only in shape, but I'm filled out. All the muscles back. I look like I've wanted to for 15 years, you know? And so I was in a really good mental place. I think in California, it was actually pretty mentally easy. Where it was mentally difficult was at the very end, because I won the first show I did, and it was, you know, a small show, but a great show. The River City Classic, I really recommend it if anyone's in the area. So I had two shots in Sacramento. The ideal scenario was I would compete, win the first show, which I did, but there would be 8 bodybuilders so I can get a pro card and then get on stage in the pros with Jeff. But unfortunately, there was a very small number of bodybuilders, so the pro card wasn't on the table. So I got a win, which is awesome. We practiced, peak week, which I came in great, hard, and we pushed it a little further, and I came in even fuller for the next one. But I didn't realize how much I still have that inner, this dog, like as you call it, who wants to get on stage and win. So when I placed second in the middleweights, a competitive class, and, you know, Adam McDonald, great physique, you know, and it was very tight, at least looking back on it, I think. But he did deserve the win. It was a difficult second place to take, and I didn't expect that because, you know, I placed second in my show in April and did not care at all because I'd gotten so many season personal bests. And then I came in confident off the win. I was the leanest I'd ever been. I was shredded, and I felt like we did everything perfect. And I wanted to, you know, do the whole pro thing with Jeff and not just have my PNBA pro qualification, but be a WNBF pro. Like my original goal when I saw the Natural Bodybuilding and Fitness magazine back in the day at Borders, you know, like being WNBF pro was kind of like entry level, like lifetime bucket list natural bodybuilder goals. So to fall short of that, I think it was a surprisingly difficult mental challenge for me. And it really made me, I think, conflicted because finishing the season with competing as a pro to keep my pro card and not having to worry about that was where I wanted to be. So then I spent the next 9 weeks before my last show of the season debating whether or not I would keep going and do like either the WNBF Singapore or go out to Florida where Jeff competed as a pro and try to get my pro card again. But I was also just done. Like I didn't want to die anymore. It had been 30 at that point. I think to the mayhem it had been 32 weeks or 31 weeks.
Yeah.
And I had been shredded since. I mean, like I had been in what would be considered stage condition depending on the division and depending on like whether it was first time or not, but roughly in stage shape since March. So I've been, you know, March, April, May, June, and then most of July. So it's been 5 months of being in a status of like he's in stage shape.
Yeah.
So I was feeling it, and I wasn't sleeping through the night. My libido was completely gone. Literally shooting blanks. Which is, and you know what I'm saying? The few times that would be in a scenario where that would actually happen, I'm like, oh, it's nice there's no cleanup, but things are not working right. This is odd, and irritable. Being able to be a good husband and a good friend and a good coach and all those things, but having to put forth effort to do so.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, don't be an asshole today. If that's your daily mantra, you're probably a little stressed. People noticing I was a little shorter than normal. And like I said, if a meal gets pushed back by an hour or two, all of a sudden my body's like, okay, we're done. Like, you don't have any stored body fat, so glycogen's not enough. You need to be really hungry. So yeah, and enjoying food way too much. Man, this soup is great. So I was like, I need to get back to normal life. So I had that voice in my head, and also the voice that said, you're in a great position to win a pro card. It's just a matter of who shows up. Different panel of judges, you might already have it. So knowing that I was that close, and that with how subjective the sport is, it was just a matter of maybe doing one or two more shows and I'd probably get a pro card. I had these two voices like, no, we're done. Get out of here. You've done what you said to do. Huge PR for the season. You've flown around the world, traveled, killed it in presentations, shown people what's possible during prep, achieved elite conditioning, brought a muscular balanced physique to the stage, and really fulfilled every goal I had. But that competitor in me had a very strong voice. So eventually, the more, I would say, balanced and sane voice in me won out, and I did the last show of the season back in New Zealand. Had my mom there, and I knew pretty much that night that I was done, and I was much more satisfied with that. But it did take me, I would say, I'd say 2 weeks post my last show to finally be able to look back and be like, that was the right decision. I'm not bitter. I don't have resentment. I don't have any regrets looking back. But it took a while.
So we're satisfied with the way everything went.
Absolutely. Like, I'm overjoyed looking back, and I needed some distance on it to see my picks and to not have it be influenced by the placings, the feedback I got, and just to be able, or even just the mindset I had at the time when I wasn't as objective. I thought I looked a lot worse in my last show than I really did.
Yeah.
So when I finally got the pictures, I was like, oh, I'm maybe slightly more spilled than the Mayhem, but basically just as full, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that I did notice is, like, literally in the last 2 weeks of prep, I started to have, my body started to be weird. It started being funky. Like while I was in at the EPC that week, and then when especially the very final week going into the show, which then I think snowballed on itself. Like when you're in peak week and you're supposed to be doing the final week of prep and going into a show looking better, and when you start getting like bloated ankles and like weird things looking and like, bloated stomach, you're like, this is the exact time I don't need this. That stresses you out, which then makes it worse. So I remember I actually started to spill over on a very light load, or maybe it was just, we don't now know, maybe like an allergic response, but something.
Yeah. The immune system kind of a little bit.
Yeah. So one interesting thing we found was that I took some antihistamines while we were here in Singapore, and some of the water retention I had and bloating went away pretty quick. So I think it was just that my immune system was compromised and being weird, and the radar was very touchy, and it literally started to affect me at the award ceremony of my last show. So like I was starting to look bad on stage, and I just got off and left, and I was like, whew, dodged that bullet, because then I started to look really weird and spilled over that night, and it was like that for weeks afterwards. Every time I eat, almost regardless of what it was, I'd get some kind of immune response now in retrospect. So anyway, the body was certainly basically just going uncle after the 35th week in the last show. And that in combination with just wanting to eat food and live life and then not think about, I want to eat food so I don't have to think about food, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like all that, like there was, I'd say less now, but I would say for the first 2 weeks post-show, I really was just super food focused. And I was intentionally gaining weight so that I wouldn't be as super food focused. And now I'm just kind of like I'm like a foodie now. I'm just overly interested. Like there's a discussion about what we're going to get for lunch or dinner, and you guys are just like, whatever, And I'm not there yet, but I think it's more just the mental behaviors that I'm used to.
Hey everybody, It's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ, we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.
I think it takes a while before you can actually look at your prep and really, give it a fair assessment. I remember Luke. He pissed off a lot of people because, Luke, that's probably part of the reason he gets shit done is he's going through, he downplays the difficulty of it. So he was in the middle of his prep, and he was talking about how, this has been pretty easy. It's like, it's like you have a plan.
Everyone complaining about this shit's easy.
It's like you have someone, you outsource certain things to other people, you take care of your responsibilities, you do that every day, and eventually, you don't even have to be perfect, just be, within 90%. Mm-hmm. And eventually it adds up, and you're there. And remember he mentioned that, and people were just losing their shit over it, almost as if he was disrespecting the sport,
Right.
Bunch of things. You just don't have enough muscle for it to feel shitty. Things like that,
I'm going to make some reason up why it's not.
Yeah. And so now in hindsight, I forgot when I talked to Luke. I think it was in Texas. It was in Texas this year. So it's been about almost 2 years since he prepped. And he's like, it was actually really fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's just, he was so caught up in that mode, and just a few weeks after, he was still really caught up in that he didn't really, at no point is he going to, let his opponent know that, hey, you kind of got me wobbly.
Or let himself know, too.
Yeah, with his opponent being the prep.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's another aspect to it with Luke that, he'll struggle. He might not train for a month, and he'll let himself go just generally, so he is a very much I need an objective goal to stay motivated, and when I am, it's easy. Mm-hmm. So I do think it was easy for him at the time, but when you look back and you haven't trained hard for a month, and you're 20 kilos up, and you're 10 kilos up of fat and 5 kilos down of muscle, and you're like, man, why was I so focused during prep? It changes your perspective. Yeah. It makes you realize that the things that you do during prep are actually hard to maintain outside of prep when you don't have a goal. Mm-hmm. So I think that the difference there is that he struggles to have that kind of discipline, or even some modicum form of it, without having an objective goal. Yeah. Which he's talked about. I'm not throwing my man under the bus or nothing, but he finds it a lot more difficult. He's drawn to doing prep again because he knows how good he can be with that goal, and that makes it easier. But he can't garner the motivation to have that be there's a big gap. We always talk about trying to bring the difference between your off-season and in-season real close together, because you're motivated, you're committed, you get the 3Ds, and you see it as a journey. I think for him, he's still working on that. Mm-hmm. And he's realizing, oh, wow, the difficulty is there because I had to gather my forces to make 6 months go perfect. But I just can't do that year-round. So the difficulty is it looks different.
I think that's there, too, but also the DOMS needs to settle in.
Yeah, that's true.
It takes a little bit for you to be like, whoa, I'm myself 100% now, mm-hmm. and I can look back and I'm like, whoa, I stripped away this, and that.
That's a good point. You don't notice the things that aren't there because you've jettisoned them.
Yeah. You've just ran with that now. It's it's what you have to work with, so you learn to work with that.
Yeah.
So I think even more so, say 6 months from now, you'll be able to look back at this and I think respect your level of effort even more. And
I'm glad you didn't say. I think 6 months when you look back and realize it wasn't that good. You really fucking pushed it hard and jettisoned a lot of things. So
it's gonna be a combination of those things too. You're gonna be like, oh wow, so I pushed a little bit harder than I thought. It was safer and healthier, but even still,
still bodybuilding.
There's still some things here and there that now we know, and next time, and that's the fun part. Is you just keep finding more things, and it's like, fuck, they're minor annoyances. Like sometimes you feel like prepping just to go back and correct that thing. You know, just to have a different, an opportunity to have a different response. So you're not done yet, and that's exciting because I think in another 6 months to a year, you'll be able to go back and really, really like analyze, because no one can analyze it like you because you're living in this thing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. One thing, I know I'm not done yet. So just as an example, we went out and got food yesterday, and I think we'd clocked almost 15,000 steps. And I was hungry after dinner. We got some Vietnamese. And so I got a piece of chocolate, and I got a cone with this one scoop of ice cream. Very reasonable amount of dessert. And we were sitting there, and I just couldn't really focus on what you guys were saying. I'm like, I'm fucking hungry. And you were like, just take some time, let it settle.
And we're talking about topics you like.
Yes.
I threw sci-fi at you. I was interested, but also I'm like, hey, this is this thing. Let's.
You were like, what was the first sci-fi book that really made you love the thing? And like, tell me about your most favorite sci-fi book. And I was like, I want to eat more. And you're like, all right. And I'm like, I tried, man. So I got up and I got 2 more pieces of chocolate and a scoop of ice cream with no cone. And then, honestly, I ate it and I was there again. I was back, you know. And that just doesn't happen to me in the off season. Like, so I'm clearly still recovering.
Yeah.
I've never returned to get more ice cream in the off season, ever.
When you had a piece of chocolate first and then the ice cream.
Correct.
And then more ice cream.
So no, I had a piece of chocolate with ice cream, and then I had 2 pieces of chocolate with ice cream.
Okay. So
It was just 2 rounds. 2 rounds minus the cone.
So yeah, but I guess, man, it's like the more you allow yourself to do this at the end, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's
And the funny thing is, there's a couple ways to look at that. Someone could be like, "Oh, you're still fucked up," or if you needed to do that, you probably should do it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I didn't worry about, I don't have a scale with me here. I didn't really actually look good this morning. Yeah, the funny thing is the day after that, I felt I looked good enough that we took reverse recovery diet photos. Yeah. So I took photos the next day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me that says like whatever surplus or maintenance, I don't know, that I was in, it was appropriate for my current level of recovery. You know? And I do feel a lot better today.
Well, and this is why before you enter a prep, you need to have your habits in line.
Yep.
Because what ends up happening after all of this stuff, that's eventually where you end up is whatever you created, you know, whatever system you created for yourself in the off season, that's worked. It's like doesn't exhaust you in regards to like decision making. You know, that automated thing you do, you end up back there.
Yeah.
Like that's where you will be. Like.
And one thing I'm really happy with myself about, so one thing I can't have a lot of appreciation for is I remember back in 07 or 09 or even 2011, I could have done 5 trips to the ice cream. You know, like the only reason I would have stopped is because I would have just said, I should stop here. But this time, like, I assessed it. I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm hungry. And you were like, hey man, just give it some time to settle. And I went, okay, cool. We talked. And then I was like, all right. I'm still just thinking about food. We're sitting here, like you said, talking about something I like. And then I went back, had chocolate, had ice cream. Homeboy showed up, and we were engaging with one of our, you know, folks who attended our seminar, and I stopped thinking about food. So it was just, I was able to assess accurately what my actual combination of cravings and satiety and hunger were, and they went away. In 07, it would have been like, I can't tell the difference. I'm going to keep eating until I'm like can barely move, you know. And I didn't look bloated or spilled over the next morning. So I feel like my assessment of what I wanted and needed was accurate to something related to my physiology. It wasn't just all a lack of behavior and a lack of, you know, a disconnection with my hunger and satiety. Because that's what we do early on in prep and early on in your season. And you have to get shredded. Is ignore your hunger, ignore your satiety, just go by the numbers and just let your coach tell you what to do and just be like, I'm a soldier. And I think as you become a more experienced competitor, hopefully you can get more in tune with what your body needs. Even when dysregulated, and know that, okay, my body's dysregulated, it's telling me to eat way more than I need, but that means I actually do need it, you know? So anyway, I felt pretty good about that. As annoying as it was for you to notice I'm not listening to you and thinking about chocolate, I think the chocolate helped me then listen to you afterwards. So,
yeah, Yeah, no, so it's coming around, and it makes you realize just some of the cruel things. We had best intentions, but we had our people go through. It's like, you're not done prepping yet. You have this other leg that's going to require just as much, if not more, discipline. And it does, actually. It still does. Doing all this stuff requires its own form of discipline, because it feels it's this one phase. Like, one thing we mentioned to people is that, like, the biggest surplus you will have during your whole off season is going to be the weeks after a show.
Yep.
So it looks totally different from anything else you've had in recent times since your last show if you exited that way.
Yeah, this is more. I'm eating more food than when I was trying to push to 100 kilos.
Yeah. So
It's in 2018.
It feels wrong. It feels weird, and but it's the right thing to do, and it's what's going to put you back where we need to be long term.
Yeah, and at this stage, I'm not trying to push a surplus. I'm just eating so I don't feel restrained.
Yes.
And then on certain days, I just notice, and what it's happening because of my habits. Like, for example, we just grabbed lunch, and I had two salmon fillets and green beans and a salad of pears and beets, right, with dressing. So it had a fair amount of calories from that too, and that was nice and satisfying. That was the same thing I did yesterday with one fillet of salmon, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm fucking starving. I'm like, today we're probably going to clock a lot of steps. Let me have 2 fillets of salmon and get front loaded, so I'm not at the ice cream shop needing a second round, But if I do, I do. Mm-hmm. But I think, I'm probably my default setting based on my behaviors is not a surplus. I think it probably puts me around maintenance. And then when my body throws its hand up and goes, listen, motherfucker, you need to eat more, I do. And I notice that it's putting its hand up less and less and less, which is a good sign of that I'm actually recovering. So,
excellent. So we're on our way. We feel confident in regards to our path at this point. One thing about the reverse diet, like this was my main selling point, even like to myself, as I was like trying to keep a certain weight, was that I just get to take that surplus that I'm going to be using for a while now and like really spread it out. So it's like, instead of getting to my top end weight in 8 months, I might be able to push it to like 14 months if I do a really good job during this most difficult leg.
you get more time gaining.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I guess for a lot of folks, it's like seriously just like the vanity aspect. It's like it feels weird to let go of this.
Don't want to lose me looking my best.
Right. But there was also that other part, and then also the metabolic investment and all this. But, at the end, you don't really, so whether it's like investing in your metabolism, whatever that is.
It's not, by the way, for the record.
You can't do that.
If I did do it, I did it back in July, because I already did the reverse diet, right? Yeah.
If you want to go.
Yeah, I had a 9-week reverse diet, and I didn't feel good afterwards. I needed to gain 9 kilos.
You still need the recovery diet to fix the reverse diet, right?
Exactly.
So whether it's that, whether it's like looking your best, or just making an off season, like let it run longer, let this gaining phase run longer. You're not going to get any of those until everything is healthy again. Mm-hmm. You're not going to really start putting on new muscle mass until everything is good.
Yeah. If you're firing blanks, never interested in sex, don't wake up with morning wood. I mean, I'm not getting my testosterone checked, but it's probably not even within my whatever my normal is. It's not within the normal range.
You don't need a blood test to tell you that.
No, yeah. And it makes me think that that's probably not the best environment for gaining new muscle mass, So, I don't know, I'm just trying to get back to a state where I'm ready to start. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm close, but I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah, we're trying to connect our, like what we're doing now to our long-term goals, and this is the best thing we can do for ourselves is go back and get some more ice cream sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. In regards to, I guess this is... we've talked about kind of the X's and O's of the bodybuilding, like the strategies, how you felt or respond, stuff like that. Let's get into your personal life, man.
Yep.
Because that's super important. Because that's like my thing is whenever I meet my athletes at shows, usually the mayhem, right? Mm-hmm. I'll go up to my athlete. They're usually with a significant other, and just based off their interaction. Yeah. How they're feeling, how they're, like, are they excited here because it's like the big days come, or are they like, hey, screw you, dude, you did this to him,
How dare you destroy my wife or my husband, yeah.
Yeah. So those that we spend the most time with, they kind of come along with us, man.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, you want to minimize that, but I think anything kind of goes like that. Like, for example,
That's what you sign up for if you're a husband or a wife. Like if Barb was like, hey, I want to do a show. I know it's been since 2011. I told you I was never going to do it. I'd be like, I've got your back.
Yeah.
We're in this together. And I'm going to be able to give you that feedback so because you lose objectivity. You as a focused athlete, you have to be at certain times a focused athlete.
or right now she's going through some pretty hard schooling, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of the same thing. It's like you might have to cancel a few date nights because there just isn't time for that.
Yeah, and that almost worked out because, like, there's certain like I said, there's certain aspects of my body that are not going to allow us to interact in the same way that a couple normally would, and more so than that, I'm just super focused. Like, if we let our conversations trend towards a topic, if she's the one who started it, she'll talk about her school, and if I'm the one who started it, I'd be talking about my diet or my recovery diet, and it is to the point, past the point where we're just sharing. It's to the point where each one of us is obsessive. She's obsessed with pushing really hard in school. I'm obsessed with figuring this whole recovery or prep thing out. And we both understand that about each other. And we can both give each other feedback and be like, yeah, you've been pretty focused. I get it, And we've also helped each other in that way. So, for example, one of the things that I've been doing for Barb is I've been cooking dinner. Normally we cook together. And it gives her an extra hour to study, and it allows me to feel like I'm contributing in a way when I know in other areas I'm not contributing the way I used to, or I'm not as present, And then we also started going on walks to breakfast, which is a good way for me to kind of combine the needs of my fitness and health goals, for her to kickstart the day with kind of a positive behavior, and allows us to have that time to talk and connect. So there's been some intentionality that I feel good about, but it also doesn't change the fact that I do get focused, I do get irritable, and sometimes she feels the brunt of that. So one thing I've been really emphasizing is just checking in, like on a weekly basis with her, to be like, hey, how are things?
Here's a great system.
Yeah, here's how I think I've been doing, and I'm sure on my radar simply can't capture it all. So how are you doing?
And on your end, it takes, obviously you married Barb for a reason, but still it takes some trust, because you're like, hope you don't use this card to, to kind of, get you to do things you don't do anyways, even in the off.
You could leverage it, yeah, absolutely, which is not her style, yeah. Fortunately, we're not in a manipulative relationship. So
I'd still make you do little things, right?
Of course you would, yeah. So I would say personal life went about as well as it could, and I think she wouldn't be like, oh my God, I had no idea you were prepping. Maybe in March she would have, but I think by the end of it she was like, yeah, you definitely had to push hard, and I noticed it, and I think she would probably say that I managed it better than ever before and as good as I could have.
Yeah, and you don't want to be that way. That's the difference. Whereas I think
Consistent distance.
I think sometimes, when we first got going, it's like you almost wanted to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just how it's going to be, and I'm going to it's almost like this is how it's supposed to be, and if I'm not this way, like, I almost feel like the prep is not going to be as successful.
Failed, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When in reality it's that's, again, like, the healthier you can keep everything, the better off it's going to be, because now you have all these other stresses. It's like, I'm fucking up here, I'm fucking up there,
Yeah.
and it's a body that's already very easily stressed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like not running away from your responsibilities and keeping up with everything.
Yeah.
At the end makes it so that your prep is more successful.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where people are like, oh, I'm prepping, I need to change my whole life around so I don't have to deal with that stuff. And I think that actually exposes you to more stress. It's more things you change. And there's expectancy of the prep than sucking. But the fact that I was like, I've still got to schedule my podcast. I'm still got to meet with my students. I'm still going to travel. I'm still going to go to conferences. I'm still going to be a good husband. And those things got harder, but it would have been way worse if I'd been like, I'm not going to do these things, or I'm going to cancel the season of the podcast, or what have you. And I think it also helps you get a better gauge of how the prep is going. Like, when those things actually get harder, instead of just cutting them out, it tells you something, and it gives you the opportunity to think about, okay, how do I integrate it into my life better? And one thing I remember during the 10-day push we did before my April show, I put my hand up and I went, I need one of these days to be a moderate day. I've got a whole day of meetings and I can't be like this. So it ended up being, instead of 9 low days, it was 9 low days and 1 moderate day for the 10-day quote-unquote push. And that just made me realize, like, shit, that's the way it should always be. Not this arbitrary system that doesn't take, or not arbitrary, but generic system that is only based on our best quote-unquote physiological guess. Like, oh, we need 2 high days in a row because of science studies, insulin, LH pulsatility, and, magnitude of feeding versus duration. I'm like, or maybe I have a lot of meetings at school on Wednesday, I'm going to have a high day. And that makes it so much better. Like, I think that makes a lot more sense to have it be this customized approach to allowing your whole global, like, stress levels be lower. And that certainly was something I learned from. And I'll probably be doing even more next time I prep, sometime in 2045.
Yeah. Shoot. So how many weeks post-show now?
It'll be 6 in 2 days.
Okay. Shoot. So that's how we doing.
I think that's so. You've been asking me a lot of questions. Let's finish it up with me asking you questions. Any things that you think I had blind spots on that would be good for me to know? Or murky spots even.
Murky spots. I think our conversations when it came to this were you're very good about it. It's just like, this is what you're doing, and you just do it.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's like, you shouldn't do that with your coach, but we've done this enough where, early on I just said, let you sign off on things. I'm like, yeah, that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. And I trust it based off the feedback you're giving me, that makes sense. And what would happen is, you remember that part, like when you're like, I need some food for this leg here.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, that part, I'm like, okay, I trust that is the case. Yeah, do your thing, dude. But then towards the end, it was more like,
what am I doing?
Here, this is what I look like. This is basically the priority from here to here. So that went very well, and I think I did as much coaching as I needed to do at this point.
Yeah, it's something like, to give you feedback. I think you made a seamless transition between being the coach who is basically just a consultant early on to letting me do my thing and being like, you missed this. Like, your refeed, you look flat. Yeah, like, I don't know that refeed refed you. I'm like, oh, shit, good point. To then at the end, I'm like, here's my video. What do I do? And you're like, I can do that. So that there wasn't any, I didn't even notice a change because that's actually a very different coaching relationship.
Yeah. How we started and how we ended was totally different.
And it never was formal. And I think I'm putting myself in your shoes. I probably would have fucked that up at some point. Like, my athlete has showed me that they want me to be a consultant, and then they become really needy at the end, and I probably would drop the ball. So I think you did actually a really good job with an informally difficult situation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, it was a smooth prep. So no, my end as a coach, and especially that last part when there's just very little things that you're almost willing to negotiate. It's like, no, we just need to do this. I might not be right.
But we need to stick to a game plan.
But I think I'm within 90%, and I felt at ease because there's that 10% that it might be the wrong move. And I knew that, you as a coach yourself, that, like, I am not coaching Jesus, that I'm like, if I fucked up, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, we'll keep that in mind and we'll go from here.
We did the best we could. It was a reasonable decision. And if I was a little spilled or a little whatever, then that happens. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
And you know how that is. It's like when your athlete at the right time gets out of your way. It's so much easier to do work. You have a nice empty desk and space to work with.
So I didn't get in your way?
No, not at all. And, you're always a little concerned. Like, so for example, with you, the concern is that, hey, you know enough about how these things work, where sometimes what happens in the trenches doesn't always necessarily, like, there's these things that we're doing that, 5 years from now, like, science will be like, this is, you guys were right about this one. So kind of like we talked about, like, diva athletes, that they're so talented it doesn't matter, anything will work.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to drive that bus a little bit differently. I was afraid that we might have to drive the bus a little bit differently, but if anything, I think you got out of the way even more than
I didn't pull the science card.
No. Or I think this is this just is too contrasting from what everything I know tells me we should be doing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because it's different, man. It's different. Like, it's like, yeah, you have the recipe book, but it's different when, like, you have a fucking restaurant and all these things can go wrong, and you're just acting as you go, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, no, I think we did a good job with that. Yeah, we didn't burn down the kitchen. It was
That's
fine.
good.
Broke a few glasses, but every prep's like that.
Exactly. That's just part and parcel of owning a restaurant and getting in the biz.
You're food focused, man. You brought up the restaurant. It wasn't me.
You just said broke a glass.
I brought up the restaurant.
You said the kitchen. Yeah, come on. Yeah.
So, no, I think we did a very good job with that part. I wish I could give you more feedback on the personal stuff, but I can't because I don't see you except when I see you.
Right.
So, but we have Barb on the line, and
Barb's honest with me the whole way through. So
we don't have that kind of technology. But but you guys kept in communication. I think that's great. That's like, you know, you had the other check-in, which I think is super important. And maybe you guys should be using that. Find yourself one person, right?
Yes. Find yourself someone who interacts with you regularly, who you trust, who will be
like
honest with you.
Like a liaison to yourself, man. Like your healthy self, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know how you are normally.
Yeah.
And you are or aren't that to X degree.
Yeah.
It's good feedback.
Shoot.
All right, folks. That's me, and we'll see you next time.
We got to go eat.
Hey guys, this is Coach Alberto Nunez. Thanks so much for listening to our show today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I wanted to take a moment to remind you guys that we have a giant video library of educational materials at 3dmjvault.com. The Vault is a place where we have organized our best information, paired it up with some of our favorite resources, and shared with all of you guys in one online database. We have courses on contest prep, hypertrophy, posing, fat loss, postseason recovery, and a whole lot more. Most of it is free. Some of it is for purchase to help support this podcast, and we continue adding pieces of updated content to it every couple of months that members always have unlimited access to. Once again, that's 3dmjvault.com, and we really hope you like it.